Hello, hello, hello. Hello, friends. Hello, friends. I am getting myself set up here so I can get my life together. All right. I am just also going live on IG. Hey, y'all. It's Thursday. It's time for office hours with Dr. JT. Super excited that we have another time together. So let me just pin a quick comment on IG for folks. If you're here, say hey in the chat so that way I know you're here. If you are watching the replay, drop a hashtag replay in the comments so we can continue to build community together. All right, office hours with Dr. JT. Drop your questions in the chat. All right, pin in my comment here. Okay, good people, it's time for another office hours with Dr. JT. I am in DC right now and I've been here for a few days and getting ready to head to another um, stop on the EJT Eat, Pray, Love tour tomorrow. So I'll let you know where I'll be logging in from tomorrow. But super excited for another week of Office Hours with Dr. JT. And so if you are new to office hours, I'll just quickly introduce myself, tell you how this works, and then we're going to jump into it. So my name is Dr. Erica Jordan Thomas. I am an educator, so I'm a former teacher. I taught high school math. Shout out to my high school math teacher, my middle school math teacher, folks. You are my people. And was also an instructional coach, assistant principal, and principal. And then I left the principalship to pursue my doctorate full time. So I got my doctorate in education leadership at Harvard Graduate School of Education and graduated last May. And since last May, I've been full time in my business. So I started my personal consulting business. Y'all, it's been 4 years ago because I started it in October of 2017 and it's October 2021. So it's been 4 years. Happy birthday to EJT Consulting. And so started my personal consulting business 4 years ago. And then in March of 2020, I launched my second business, Get Launched Consulting, out of the spirit of having lots of educator friends who were curious how they could start their consulting business too. And B, out of my own experience of being the only woman, the only person of color, the only Black educator in the room on consulting engagements, as we're serving diverse communities, I felt like that just needed to change. The education consulting industry needed to be disrupted, and more people who look like the communities that we serve, more people who are leading from their values, who are equity driven, needed to be at decision making tables, working hand in hand with schools, school districts, and communities, and getting paid their worth, because an education pay scale, or excuse me, an education consultant pay scale is not the same pay scale as a teacher or principal salary pay scale. So I believe that educators deserve to be millionaires, and that's a part of my mission of Get Launched Consulting. So I do office hours every other week. So how this works is I have a private Facebook community. If you are on Instagram and you're not in that private Facebook community, you can click the link in my bio to join us. When you request to join, just make sure you answer the questions, because if you don't answer the questions, then we won't be able to accept your invite. So just make sure that you answer those questions. And when you request to join, one of the questions is, what questions do you have about education consulting? We take those questions and we release a poll every other Thursday. So every other Thursday, we release a poll of 5 questions, and the group votes on what questions they want me to answer live the following Thursday. And the top 3 questions with the most votes, I go live and I answer. For my people on IG, I'm going to apologize in advance for my ring light. I'm operating in a very small space right now. So my ring light has no option but to be closed, or else you're going to get a dark video. So my apologies in advance. But so the top 3 questions I go live and answer. So that's what we're doing today. So I got my little notes here, and these are the 3 questions we are going to be chatting about today. So question number 1 is, how do I stand out in an oversaturated market? Question number 2 is, how do I, meaning Erica, structure my work weeks, and what percentage of time do I spend on each aspect of my business? I'm excited to jump into that one. And are there certifications that you need or are recommended as an education consultant? So those are the 3 questions we're going to be talking about. And I'm excited because one of the questions that we have this week, someone added to the poll. So you have that option too, is that if there's a question you want me to answer, you can add it to the poll. And just like this week, if it's one of the top 3 questions, I'll answer it. So I'm super excited to answer that question. So we're going to start with question number 1. And one of my core values is authenticity. And so for those of you who are joining me live, would love for you to drop thoughts, reactions, additional questions that you may have as we're going throughout our because there's always wisdom within the room. Please drop that into the comments so that way we can sharpen each other's iron and continue to build community. So question number 1 is, how do I stand out in an oversaturated market? Love this question. So this question, so first off, I think it's helpful to just first anchor ourselves within a particular mindset that just because a market is saturated doesn't mean that there isn't a place for you. So I think that's the first thing, is like just naming that you should not be discouraged by if there are many people in your market who are solving a similar problem. And so one example I've heard lots of entrepreneurs share is, anytime you're in the grocery store, go down the bread aisle. There's a lot of bread, right? And so that does not mean that, people should stop making bread or someone shouldn't consider entering the market, because there's room for us all. And so I just want to start with naming that mindset that you should not be discouraged if there are many players within the market solving a similar problem that you are. That means that you have to be really clear around your messaging. And so I think a great example is, Peloton. Peloton was not the first stationary bike company. There were lots of stationary bike companies. But Peloton came on the scene and blew up for a variety of reasons, but they have a very, very different messaging. Like, I don't even know the names of any other stationary bikes, but I know the name of Peloton, right? That's because they have very clear messaging that causes them to stand out. So I'm going to share with you just a couple of tips for you to consider with your messaging to help you stand out, to help you separate yourself from other players within the market. And the tips that I'm going to share with you are coming from a book called The Brand Story, and I believe the author is Donald Miller. And so this is a book you can check out. It's a book that I'm currently reading, and it's a book that, if you're interested in learning more about these tips I'm getting ready to share with you that come from that book, that you can check out. Yes, Donald Miller, and it's called Building a Story Brand. Building a Story Brand. So in this particular book, the whole premise is that strong brands follow a particular pattern around their messaging. And what the author Donald Miller talks about is this concept called the hero's journey. And you can Google it and you'll find more information about this particular concept. But in the book, he talks about, like, this is a storyline arc that, resonates with us as human beings. And he used lots of movies examples, like your average Marvel movie follows a hero's journey, right? And so there are common aspects to the storyline that his argument is that they just deeply resonate with us as people. And so the kind of premise behind the book of A Hero's Journey is that there's a particular protagonist that goes through these different kind of predictable points where they have some type of dilemma. They, maybe have some type of temptation. they meet a guide, someone who, shows them the way, then they're faced with some type of conflict, and then there's some type of like victory rebirth process that happens. So that's just a super like summarized, truncated version of the hero's journey. Google it to like get more information. But like that's just like a overly simplified example of the hero's journey. So what Donald Miller argues is that most businesses and companies, the misstep that they make is they make themselves the hero in the hero's journey. So they are centering themselves as the business, as the hero in a hero's journey of how they've overcome some particular, conflict, that how they've met a guide, how they've had some type of rebirth process. And what Donald Miller argues is that actually your client or consumer is the hero in the hero's journey. So how do you know your client and consumer deep enough that you know the conflict that they're experiencing, and you become the guide in their hero's journey that ushers them through to the other side of victory and a rebirthing process. So I think it's a really, really interesting way to think about messaging, is centering your client and consumer. And there's three motivations or three stories that Donald Miller talks about, kind of telling, or messages to kind of name for your audience. So I'm just going to share those three with you. And I see someone's already naming in the chat that they've been having a conversation with their business coach around this. This is awesome. So oftentimes, so there's three kind of dilemmas or motivations that our clients experience. And Donald Miller's argument is that in your brand messaging, you actually need to talk about all three of these versus most businesses only talk about one. So the three are, there's usually some type of external motivation, there's an internal motivation or dilemma, and then there's a philosophical motivation or dilemma. The name of the book is called Building a Story Brand. Building a Story Brand. For one of my folks who is live with me, if you could just type that into the comments for me, just to support the community. Again, it's called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, just so that way that'll support all of us. All right, so there's three dilemmas or motivations that Donald Miller argues that we should be tapping into and talking about in terms of our messaging: external, internal, and philosophical. Donald Miller argues that most companies focus on the external. And he names you need to focus on external, internal, and philosophical. So let me give you a quick example. Thank you so much. I think that's Brandy. If that's Brandy, thank you, Brandy. If it's not Brandy, tell me who you are so that way I can thank you. Okay, so let me give you a quick example. So let's use the example of Apple. Some people might say, and thank you, Meg. Oh, I love y'all. Thank you. Y'all are helping me out. Appreciate you so much. So I'll give you an example using Apple. So Apple's external issue, dilemma, or motivation that they can be solving for could potentially be that having a sleek and sophisticated access to technology, like the everyday user having access to sophisticated technology that doesn't feel overwhelming, right? Like that's the external problem. But the internal problem would be that, like, I, as the everyday, average Jane, Joe, Jaleesa, I'm trying to think of more culturally relevant names rather than Jane and John Doe, like Jaleesa or, but anyway, rather than like the average everyday person, the internal problem might be like, I want to feel competent as I'm interacting with technology, as our world is changing and becoming more technologically savvy. I want to feel more competent and being able to interact with technology. That's the internal problem. So that's usually solving either something related to confidence, money, happiness, fulfillment. There's usually, similar patterns around what an internal problem is. It's how do I, as a human, improve in uh, uh, my own self perception. And then the philosophical problem is usually something that's like some type of moral issue. So philosophically, it might be that like everyone deserves access to, technology. Like regardless of your income level, regardless of your education, everyone should have equal access. That's the philosophical message. So Donald Miller's argument is that your branding message should actually include all three of those. It should include the external, the internal, and the philosophical. So when it comes to standing out in an oversaturated market, you want to think about your messaging from all three of those standpoints of how does the business that you're running, how does that address the external, how does that address the internal, and how does it address the philosophical. So let me give you a quick education consulting example, and I can use my own business. I could, since I coach and develop school leaders, the external problem is that there is not a lot of quality professional development for principals. The internal problem is that every principal wants to do their job well. Every principal wants to be coached and developed. They want to have access to high quality coaching as a professional. And then the philosophical problem is that everybody deserves access to a coach, right? If Michael Jordan has a coach, why doesn't our school's principal have a coach? Or if LeBron has a coach, why doesn't our school principal have a coach? So those are three examples or that's an example of the internal, external, and philosophical. So let me know in the comments some of your thoughts or reactions to this. I'm curious which one of those three messages have maybe you've already experimented with before. Which one of those feels most new to you? If you're on IG and you're listening, like I'm curious if this is resonating with you, if this is making sense. You can send me some hearts if like your process is like, like this is making sense for me. So that's our first question, is in terms of how to differentiate yourself or stand out in an oversaturated market. Donald Miller's text around building a story brand, I think, is really, really helpful here. All right, I'm seeing some of the hearts. All right, that's my little check for understanding. Send me some hearts if. Okay, cool. All right, if you got follow-up questions, just drop those into the chat. All right. So the second question is, how do I, as Erica, structure my work weeks? What percentage of time do I spend on each aspect of the business? Great question. So this question is that it depends. Now I'm going to answer it, but I'm going to be clear that like my percentage of what I'm spending on the business is not the same 12 months out of the year. It depends. So I'm going to share with you what it depends on. So I'm first going to give you a little bit of the behind the scenes around how I actually plan in my business. So at the beginning of the year, I actually, with my team, or actually a little bit prior to the beginning of the year, we determined what are 3, no more than 5 big projects that we're going to take on within the business. And when I say big projects, like for example, this past year, one of our big projects was tightening up our marketing systems. That was a huge, big project for us because there was just multiple layers to that. And so that could be an example. Another example could be you might decide to grow your team. So it might be hiring. An example of a big project might be rolling out a new offer or evolving your business model. So at the beginning of the year, I start with what are my 3 to 5 big projects that I'm going to be taking on this year. And then once I identify those 3, no more than 5 big projects, I then just scope them out by month. So if these are my 3 to 5 big projects, like what's happening by month. So for example, if one of them is hiring, I'd outline like when would I need to start the hiring process, when would be my target date of when I'd want to onboard someone. You know, I this isn't like super detailed. This is literally like bullet points of like by month, given these 3 to 5 projects, what are kind of the priorities then of what's happening, you know, the priorities by month. So then once I have that mapped up, and once you're mapping it by month, that means you're also mapping out a quarter, because 3 months are a quarter. So then at the beginning of every quarter, I go back to that list of my 3 to 5 projects, and then therefore the bullet points that I've identified for priorities for those months. And then for the quarter, I'm now looking at, okay, for the next 3 months, this is what's coming up. Now let me zoom in on the current month that we're in. And the current month that we're in, this is my revenue goal. And then given what I've mapped out of, you know, my 3 to 5 projects, and then the bullet points by month, these are the bullet points that are the priority for this month. So now I'm in week 1 of this month. If these are the bullet points, what do I need to do in week 1? And if this is my revenue goal, what needs to happen week 1? And then when I get to week 2, I'd figure out where my progress was with week 1, where do I need to pick up in week 2, knowing where I need to get to at the end of the month, and I'd figure out, you know, what would be the priorities for week 2, and so on and so on. So that's a high level example of like how I determine how I spend my time. And that means it shifts because certain priorities have more of an emphasis in certain quarters or months than others. So just to kind of make this even clear, I'll give you an example of, like, for instance, for this month for me, of course, every month has a revenue goal. So that's an area of focus that we're tracking and we're thinking about per week. And then for this month, the bullet points that I had was the Get Launched Consulting website. So this is to let y'all know we're getting ready to roll out a new website for the program. I'm so excited. So you should have, you probably, hopefully you've seen the wait list by now. Our website is coming. It's about to be 10 times more beautiful than our little wait list page. It's serving its purpose, but a website is coming. So that's one of my, you know, priorities for this month. And when I say website, we're working with a designer, but I had to write all the copy. I had to think through, like, you know, all the structure of that. So that was one of my priorities this month. I did a live workshop last week. And so that was another priority for this month of marketing and delivering that workshop. And then lastly, the last priority for this month is just our prep to open up Get Launched Consulting enrollment. And so thinking through, there's some things that we're on the runway to be prepared to open up enrollment here. So given those things, those are my priorities, the way that I approach my week. So in my week, Tuesdays and Thursdays are meeting days. So that's when I schedule any meetings that could be revenue generating. They could be just client. They're just any type of meeting. So for example, today I had a meeting with my social media VA. I had a meeting with a potential client who I'm delivering some PD for, a client that I'm delivering some PD for in a couple of weeks. And I had 2 strategy sessions with clients. So Tuesdays and Thursdays are my meeting days with actual people. Wednesdays are my planning days. Mondays are my internal team meeting days. So I have a team meeting with everyone on my team, and then I have a one-on-one meeting with my executive assistant. So we do that on Mondays. And then Fridays are planning or off days for me. And so I know that doesn't answer the question of the percentage, but again, like, those percentages are determined by my priorities. And so I'd probably say this week I probably had on my Tuesdays and Thursdays, maybe 30-40% of that was like strategy sessions. And that's just the Tuesday and Thursday, not the whole week, but of those meeting days, like 30% of that was strategy sessions. I would say the other 30% was like client meetings or team meetings, and then the other 30 was like miscellaneous. Like I'm working with a website designer, so like I have to connect with them and give them feedback, and I have a copy coach, so we have meetings. So my coaching and development. So yeah, if you got questions about that, let me know in the chat and let me know what that sparks for you. And then the last question is, are there certifications we need and are recommended? The answer is no. You do not need certifications and are recommended, and or there's not ones that I personally recommend. Here's my philosophy. My philosophy is that results matter. So now, for instance, I'm a certified teacher and principal, so I mean, I think it makes sense that I'm coaching principals, and I've been a principal. So, would I recommend that you are a certified principal if you're working with principals? I think it depends on the problem that you're solving, and given the problem I'm solving is so deeply intertwined with the actual role, yeah, that definitely helps that I'm certified as a principal and I've been a principal. But if the problem I'm solving is related to special education, knowledge and skill building, then you probably may not need certification as a principal, right? Because that's really not deeply intertwined with solving that problem. But one thing I'll just say here, and I need to say it quickly because my battery is getting ready to die, is that I would encourage you, if you're thinking about certification, I think there's a part of certification that builds confidence, which like hold space for that. And I think thinking about what is the return on the investment, right? So, and sometimes confidence is the return on investment, because with the credential, you are more confident in charging a particular price point. Cool. But if you are not clear on the return on the investment for the credential, then I think that's when you have an opportunity to look a little bit deeper into it. So those are 3 questions, and I'm wrapping up here quickly because my battery on my computer is getting ready to die. But the last thing that I'll just name is, y'all, we're getting ready to open up enrollment for Get Launched Consulting before the end of the year. And so if you are an educator and you're ready to grow your education consulting business to 6 figures, you want to make sure you're on the wait list, because you're going to have the first opportunity to join Get Launched Consulting. And so if you are on Facebook, that link is in this post. If you're on IG, you can click the link in my bio. And those are 3 questions. So thank you all for taking the time. I'll be back next Thursday. And if you're on IG, click the link in my bio to join our Facebook group. All right, y'all. Talk to you soon.